Today's teaching is on equanimity. And I chose that topic today because I
Lama
think,
Yeshe, Lama
yes,
Yeshe, would you like me to record this? Or is it being recorded? Yes, I see it is. Never mind.
okay, I'll start again though. So today's teaching is on equanimity. And there are the four immeasurables in Tibetan Buddhism or in Buddhism as a whole. And they are immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity, which means that you are not being attached to people that are close to you, your friends, family, and so forth, and have aversion towards those people that are distant from you. It's not hard to describe equanimity. It's much more difficult to maintain equanimity. And quite honestly, it is really the most important and the first of the four immeasurables that needs to be practiced. Because if we don't have equanimity, then we cannot have immeasurable love for all beings. We cannot have immeasurable compassion for all beings, and we cannot want all beings to have immeasurable joy and happiness. So this is really you might say, the root of these four immeasurables: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Now, equanimity is not a thought, it's not an emotion. What it really is a steady, conscious realization of what the true reality really is. That equanimity gives us the ground for developing wisdom and for developing freedom from samsara, freedom from our habitual patterns. Equanimity protects our compassion and our love. It keeps our compassion from being towards some people and not towards others, or towards other beings, other animals. Some people find it much easier to love a pet dog than it is to love a human, any human. So it's really important to have this equanimity. Now, equanimity is not detached. It's not a cool aloofness. True equanimity produces a radiance and a warmth of being that other people can pick up and will pick up. Here is a quote from the Buddha. He describes a mind filled with equanimity as, quote, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Now, impartiality, which is another word for equanimity, there's a Tibetan word, and it is Tang Nyam, Tangnyom. And this means giving up hatred for our enemies and giving up infatuation with our friends, and having an even-minded attitude towards all beings, free of attachment to those close, and aversion for those who are distant. I found that quote in the book Words of My Perfect Teacher on page 197. We can experience equanimity through our meditation. Also, our practice can enhance our equanimity. And I'll talk about that in a little while. So to get into this subject a little more deeply, there is the relative view and the ultimate view. I'm going to start with the ultimate view. And this has to do with emptiness, of course. One of the main schools of philosophy in Tibetan Buddhism is called Madhyamaka. And very simply put, it means the middle way. The middle way between existence and non-existence. And so what this means is that dependent arising, interdependence, is not existence. And emptiness is not non-existence. What interdependent arising means is that in the world of samsara, the physical world, the relative world, the world of appearances, that's a good way to put it, in the world of experiences and appearances, things arise due to causes and conditions. They do not arise because they cause themselves to arise. And emptiness is considered to be really potential. It is not voidness. Sometimes emptiness is actually defined, translated as voidness, and that's incorrect. That emptiness is potential. Because of emptiness, anything can arise. Here is a quote. This is by the Karmapa. This profound unity of emptiness and dependent arising is the ultimate view of all those who understand Buddhist philosophy in depth. So with this understanding, you come to see that all phenomena neither come nor go. They appear to come and go, but that is not what is happening. These are mental elaborations, constructs, and so forth. So from the ultimate viewpoint, which is free from mental elaboration and constructs, we have appearances but they are merely mere appearances. What happens is that our minds grasp on to objects or phenomena as being real. And then we elaborate on that. We add constructs, concepts, a history, what it means to me, and so forth. So there are 8 types of conceptual or mental grasping. They're in pairs. The first is arising and cessation, which was referred to in that quote before, where it says, seeing all phenomena neither come nor go. But we ordinary beings see things as arising and then ceasing. The next pair, number 3 and number 4 of the 8 conceptual graspings, is extinction and permanence. Then 5 and 6 is coming and going. And the last pair is separate and the same. So this is what happens. We get caught up in these concepts, and we do not see emptiness, and we do not see interdependent arising. Some of you have seen me show this picture, actually. The actual title of the picture is The Treachery of Images. And it is a painting by a very famous surrealistic painter. And it is of a pipe like you would use for smoking. And at the bottom of the painting, he has written, "This is not a pipe." And of course, it's a very real looking pipe. But what the Magritte is the name of the artist, by the way, Rene Magritte. What he was trying to convey is that this is not a pipe. You cannot smoke it. His words actually are, you cannot fill it. Yet we see that picture and think that it is a pipe. And then you have the word pipe on this picture. And the word pipe cannot be filled and smoked. And the concept pipe cannot be filled and smoked. So it's all an illusion. And this is the way concepts are. That these mental constructs are empty of true existence, and that an enlightened being sees this and knows this. Yet you can't say that this painting doesn't exist, that the word pipe doesn't exist, and that you've never had the thought pipe. So the Madhyamaka approach is, the middle way philosophy is that this is mere existence and is not truly existent. So mere existence relates to dependent arising or interdependence, and this is conventional reality. This is the reality that appears to ordinary beings. And again, this can be contrasted or compared with things do not exist. Because certainly things appear. So they appear, but they lack no inherent existence. They appear because of causes and conditions. The reason why I'm going through all of this is that if you can understand this, even a little bit at an intellectual level, this can help us maintain equanimity towards sentient beings and equanimity towards what we experience as we go through our daily lives, rather than being caught up with the you might say, the drama of everyday existence in samsara. So this would be looking at what we are experiencing and understanding that this is merely the way things appear to exist. This is merely mere appearance and nothing more. Some of you have been following the book In Love with the World, and in there, Mingyur Rinpoche says numerous times, mind is continuous regardless of what happens to the body. That mind is continuous, it has no beginning and no end. And again, with even an inkling of an understanding of what is being conveyed here, you realize that these ordinary, mundane concerns that we have of our daily lives aren't nearly as important as we think they are. So now getting to the relative. It's good to take a long-term view of what's going on in our lives rather than get caught up in the little daily ups and downs of our lives and the lives of other people. This doesn't mean that we don't have concern for other people in their ups and downs. A person who is a well-trained practitioner is going to find that people around him or her seem to be having a lot more ups and downs than they do. Because through a regular practice of meditation and other techniques, one's mind settles down. You naturally develop more equanimity. So here's a story that I like that helps illustrate being able to maintain some mental stability when circumstances could easily take your mind and send it on ups and downs uncontrollably, like a roller coaster. So this is a story about old Tibet. And a man woke up one morning and found that there was a stallion, a wild stallion, that had, during the night, walked into his corral. And when he saw that, he quickly snuck over to the gate and closed the gate. And now he had a very valuable breeding stallion. When the people of the village found out about this, they came over to look at it and ooh and ah, and told him how fortunate you are. This is a very valuable animal. You have just gained quite a bit of value. And the man said, in the midst of all the praise that he was receiving, maybe so, maybe not. When he got up the next day, the stallion had broken the corral and run away. And not only that, but he had taken all the horses, all the mares of this man. And when the villagers found out about this, they came to him to console him. Oh, how sad this must be, how hard this must be for you. You just lost all your horses. What are you going to do? This is just a terrible tragedy. And the man said, well, maybe so, maybe not. The next day when he awoke and he looked out, and there in the corral was his old herd, the stallion, and the stallion had brought his herd of mares. So he quickly went out and shut the gate on the corral. He had repaired what the stallion had done earlier. Now the village people came and said, you are the richest man in the whole village. This is really fantastic luck for you to have all of these horses, these beautiful horses. And the man said, well, maybe so, maybe not. Well, the man's son decided to break the stallion. And in doing so, he got up on the stallion and the stallion threw him. He landed on the ground and broke his leg. Now the villagers came by and to console him and saying, well, who's going to help you with your spring farm work? Who's going to help with the planting? Oh, this is terrible. How are you going to get this stuff done? And the man said, well, maybe so, maybe not. The next day, the Mongol army came to the village. And just like they do in Africa these days, they rounded up all the young men and took them with them to become soldiers and fight their wars. They left the man's son who had a broken leg because he was of no use to them. So that is the, you might say, the moral of that story. That it's important to take a long view and not get swayed by circumstances, to have a certain equanimity towards what our experiences are, whether they be good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant. And it is through a regular meditation practice that we can help achieve this state of mind, this way of relating to what is happening in our lives. Wisdom is important to help us distinguish between the big things and the little things. The little things, of course, we can say, well, that isn't very important. I don't have to worry about that. No problem. And actually, if we look at things from the ultimate point of view of mere appearances, it's all little. No matter what we accumulate in this life, no matter what we do in this life, it's all little, and life is short and unpredictable. It's also important to understand that we are not seeing things clearly in terms of what is actually going on. And so there's a Tibetan story of an arhat. This goes way back to India, before Buddhism came to Tibet. And an arhat has a certain level of realization, and as a result of that, they have certain, shall we say, mental abilities to see. So this arhat was walking in town, and he saw a man outside sitting down eating a fish. And he was holding an infant in his arm, like kind of like this, and then eating with his right. And there was a dog that was by his feet that wanted some of that fish too. And the dog was being a little bit of a nuisance, and the man was kicking the dog. And what the arhat could tell through his supercognition was the previous lives of these beings. So the baby was an enemy of the man who had died recently, a few years ago. So he was holding his enemy. You could say he was coddling his enemy even. The dog was the rebirth of his mother. So he was actually kicking his mother. And the fish he was eating was his father, who had died a few years ago. So he's eating his father, and his father had to be killed before he could cook it, kicking his mother, the dog, and then coddling the infant, his former enemy. We don't really know beings that we run into in this life. We do not really know the relationship we had with them in a previous life. And it's important to avoid being in a situation where we would be doing such things to people that we would like to be very kind to, that we're actually ending up in their new life being very hard on them and treating them wrongly and painfully. Now, equanimity means, as I said at the beginning, avoiding separating separate sentient beings into friend and enemy. It doesn't mean that we treat everybody the same, because people are not the same, beings are not the same. But what it does mean is that We have an equal amount of love and compassion for all beings, and we use our wisdom to treat them with love and compassion, but in a way that corresponds to where they are on the Buddhist path. This is a very, very important point. Equanimity does not mean everybody is equal. There is a wide variety, almost countless differences in sentient beings, just in the human realm, much less when you throw in the animal realm, and then the other realms, the two God realms, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realm. There's a slogan that I like that I think is very applicable here, and that is always rely on a joyful mind. And so if we keep a joyful mind, if we're happy doing what we are doing, if we're happy when we're practicing Dharma and so forth, this will really help with our equanimity. If you are joyful, it's really hard to get after people that you think are enemies. If you have a joyful mind, you might realize you don't have any enemies, even though you used to think that you had plenty of them. What keeps us from having equanimity, of course, is our afflictive states of mind or our negative emotions. We get caught up with these emotions. We believe that they are true, and then we react on impulse. When we are trying to develop our equanimity, especially as beginners, it's good to avoid people and situations that stir up your adverse mental states and conflicting emotions. It's excellent to be more mindful of what's going on in your mind, your mental states, and so forth. And then, of course, apply the remedy for them rather than letting them fester, bleed, and so on and so forth. When you are not listening to the teachings, you need to keep them in mind so that whatever is happening in our lives is blended with the Dharma. This is an important point to make, blended with the Dharma. It's good to understand where we need to do the work to develop equanimity. A improper way to relate to it would be, I just need to associate with people that don't stir up my emotions and I lose my equanimity. As a beginner, that is actually a good strategy. when you are just a beginner and your mind is pretty, your self-control of your mind is pretty weak, maybe you've just started, well, then you do want to avoid negative friends, potbellies, excuse me, not potbellies, negative friends, people that are angry, people that have strong conflicting emotions, other conflicting emotions, greed, miserliness, and so forth, that we need to avoid people like that when we are starting out. But as our control of our mind strengthens, when we have trained our mind so it is not so wild, trained it through sitting meditation, for instance, then we don't have to avoid these kinds of people. They can actually be beneficial to us because they may cause our negative emotions to arise. And with a strong mind that is under control, we can actually then learn how to keep our minds from becoming out of control and losing our equanimity and so forth. But it starts within. It starts with us working with ourselves. There's a story about two monks that are traveling back in Asia, and they're on a footpath and they're barefoot. And after a while, the young monk, the inexperienced monk, stops and talks to the other monk and says that this path is full of stones and that there are roots that are in the path, and it's really quite painful to be walking on this path. If we could just pave this whole path or cover this whole path with leather, it would solve the pain I'm having in my feet. I would no longer have that pain. And the wise old monk said, well, yes, that is true, but it would be easier to cover the bottom of our feet in leather than it would be to cover the road. And so part of equanimity is realizing that it isn't us completely transforming the world that we live in. It is us transforming our mind and the way we relate to the world that we live in. But again, going back to beginners or people that are having difficulty, then it is good to have solitude, to get away from difficult situations and difficult people. And quite honestly, right now, the external world can be very disturbing emotionally, that things are constantly coming up, whether it be the election or COVID or the possibility of not having enough money and being evicted or whatever. There are just hundreds and hundreds of reasons, if not thousands, to be stressed out and to have anxiety. And of course, that causes loss of equanimity. The solution in this case is, for these kinds of situations, don't pay so much time on social media. Don't pay so much time on YouTube looking at videos about all these terrible things that are happening in the world right now. Don't spend so much time reading newspaper articles about how bad things are and so forth. There's really not much benefit from it. And quite honestly, a lot of things on social media, you can't even trust that they are being truthful. When you're not listening to Dharma teachings, when you're not practicing, it's good to keep them in mind, to reflect on them from time to time, so that whatever happens, we can blend our mind with the Dharma. The last point that I would like to make about equanimity is that meditation. With meditation, the type that we do here at this center is following the breath. And when your mind becomes distracted, just come back to following the breath. To help do that, you count from 1 to 21. And when you reach 21, then go back to 1 and start over again. But this keeps our mind from wandering. We're not trying to stop the thoughts. We can never really stop the thoughts. That's not the problem. The problem is our attachment to the thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. And so with a regular meditation practice, what can happen is that an emotional thought comes up, a thought that would ordinarily grab us and we would run with it. These thoughts come up, but we can let them go. We can let go of them and give room in our mind for more thoughts to arise and then other thoughts. So meditation is very, very helpful in taming our minds and training in how to not get caught up with emotions that arise, especially emotions towards other people, so that we can maintain more equanimity. Now, needless to say, the benefits of equanimity are very, very important. That we all want happiness and contentment. With equanimity, we can be happy, we can be content, and we won't be so concerned about anger if it arises, and we can let go of it, and it will not be a problem if we can let go of it. Contentment is another quality that develops from equanimity. Being satisfied with what you are doing right now. Peace is another quality, feeling peaceful without gain. And few problems, maybe even no problems. So we all want this, to review the list: happiness, contentment, peace, and no problems. We can have all of this through our practice of equanimity.